Hey guys, welcome to lesson 4. So if you got your partial notes with you, you can write down the title of this lesson, which is Opportunities and Challenges Presented by Globalization to Identities. So we're still in Unit 1, and the Unit 1 question is, should globalization shape my identity? Right, the question is, should globalization have an impact on who I am as a person? Should it impact my identity? And in today's lesson, we're going to talk about a variety of ways in which globalization can impact our identities. And some of those are positive things. And we will call those positive things opportunities, right? Globalization can present us with many opportunities for our identities, but it can also present us with challenges, right? Which can be more negative things, um, negative ways in which globalization can impact our identities. Okay. And so we're going to look at some things like on this map, we see that people are moving around, they're changing their locations and they're doing what we call migrating, right? And then here we have a picture of, people becoming more and more the same, right? And so that's something that globalization can lead to. Here we have some people who are on the inside and they are getting benefits within society, but then other people are on the outsides of society. They are marginalized. That's something that can happen as a result of globalization. And then here we have a variety of people living harmoniously together. And that's something that can happen because of globalization too. All right, so anyway, let's take a look at some challenges that globalization presents to our identities and also some opportunities that globalization can present. So, challenges like yesterday, or at least in the last lesson, we took a look at the ways in which people's identities are being impacted by communication technology and media, right? And how that's leading to less diversity in the world and more of, different cultures of the world becoming the same. We call that cultural homogenization. And many people see that as a challenge, right? And often that one culture that is expanding to all parts of the world is American. And so we learned about Americanization of identities. And so that can be a challenge for some people, but it can also be an opportunity for a lot of people in different parts of the world, right? As more and more of the world start speaking the same language, well, that can lead to opportunities for people who want to travel, right? Things like that. So anyway, there could be challenges, but there could also be opportunities, right? So globalization has presented an opportunity for all of these people in this picture because these people have chosen to move from their home countries and come here to Canada. And they now have an opportunity to start a new life in a new country that they chose to move to. And that's going to impact their identities in very big ways. It's going to change who they are. Okay, so we're going to take a look at 9 different concepts through the course of this lesson. So if you look in your partial notes, you're going to see that we have sort of a table or a chart, I guess, and there are 9 different rows to this chart. And what I want you to do is I want you to write down each of the concepts in the boxes on the left side. Okay, so we have migration, assimilation, marginalization, and so on and so forth. Each of these words, each of these concepts, I want you to write them in one of the boxes on the left side of your chart. So starting with migration can go in the first one, and then assimilation can go in the next one, and then marginalization can go in the next one. And there are 9 words, and there are 9 boxes on the left side of your chart in your partial notes. So you can go ahead and do that. And then we're going to go through each of them one at a time and learn what they are. So let's start with migration, right? So you've written migration in the box on the left side of your chart. And the definition can go on the right side, where it says the movement of people from one area or country to another, right? So the definition of migration can now go over here in the box on the right side of your chart. That's where you're going to write down the definition of migration, right? So that just means people are moving around, right? With globalization, we have more people moving, and more and more people deciding to live in a new place, right? And so this picture here really shows us how people are migrating to different parts of the world. And this picture does an even better job because this picture has a circle associated with each country in the world. And the countries with green circles are countries that have a lot of people moving to their country. And the countries with orange circles are countries that have a lot of people moving out of their country. And the bigger the circle, the more people. So you can see that Canada has a green circle, which means there's a lot of people moving here every year. Usually about 300,000 people move to Canada every year. But the United States has a bigger circle because more people move to the United States every year. Um, and here we have Mexico. Mexico has a rather big orange circle, which means a lot of people move out of Mexico every year. So anyway, take a look at different parts of the world. You can see where people are moving to and where people are moving from, which is interesting. The next concept for your sheet is assimilation. Right? So what is assimilation? Well, here we have two different groups of people, right? We have the purple people and we have the orange people. And there are more purple people than there are orange people, which means that the purple people form the majority and the orange people form the minority, right? But look what's happening. Oh, some of the orange people are becoming similar to the purple people, right? The people in the minority, they are now losing their language, they're losing their culture, and they're losing their own way of life. And they have now become assimilated into the majority culture. That's called assimilation. So this is the process by which a minority culture adopts the majority culture and is absorbed into it. And it often involves the loss of language. Often people will lose their language when they become assimilated. So think about these people that we saw earlier who are moving to Canada. They already speak different languages and they have different cultures from different countries. When they move here to Canada, are they going to keep their old language? Are they going to keep their old culture? Or are they going to become assimilated? And are they going to only learn English? Or if they, move to Quebec, are they only going to learn French? And are they going to forget their old culture and forget their old language? Right? So for them, this can be a challenge, but it can also be an opportunity, depending on what they want in their own life. One example of assimilation from Canada's history is our use of residential schools. Right? Residential schools, as you probably learned in junior high, these were schools that were designed to assimilate Aboriginal children into sort of European Canadian culture, to turn them into Christian English speaking children who are meant to be the same as the majority white population in Canada. And so sometimes assimilation can be forced on people. Okay, next we have marginalization, right? So that's your third term. And this means putting a group of people in a lower or powerless position within society. So an example that we learned about is the Inuit people in Canada. So if you look at this map, the purple section is the area in which Canada's Inuit people have lived historically. And so, beside examples, you can write Inuit people of Canada. And for a lot of their history, they were very much, not in contact with other groups. And it wasn't until the Canadian government came to realize that there were a lot of natural resources in the north that they showed a bit of an interest in what life was like up there. And so there were all sorts of impacts. So I'll just give you a minute and you can read what is written on here and you will see that the Inuit people were marginalized. They were treated unfairly by the majority culture here in Canada. So you can pause this video and you can read the chart now. Okay, welcome back. All right, so that's marginalization. The next one is accommodation, right? And so that is the fourth row in your chart. So accommodation is when we make adjustments or we reach compromises to allow for differences. So because of globalization, more and more countries are starting to look like the people in this picture, right? You see people with a lot of different ethnicities, people from different religions, so a very diverse group of people living together in one country. And because of that, sometimes people are a little bit different from each other. And sometimes we need to make changes to our country to allow for those differences. For example, before I started teaching in Calgary, I was teaching in a school in Saskatoon, and we had a lot of students in our school who were Muslim. And so these Muslim students, they needed to pray during the day, right? So they had to say one of their prayers during the school day. And so we decided to make an adjustment. We made an accommodation for those students by setting aside one of the rooms in our school to be used as a prayer room for those students who need to pray, right? And so it's a form of accommodation. When there is diversity, when there are a lot of different types of people, sometimes countries like Canada need to make changes, make adjustments to allow for people to live their lives in diverse ways. Another example that you know, has been in the news in Canada in the past few years is when girls are participating in sports. Girls who are having to wear the hijab. So the hijab is a headscarf that some girls wear because of their religion. And so when those girls want to participate in sports, there have been times in some parts of Canada where they have not been allowed, because one rule that we often have with certain sports is that you're not allowed to wear something on your head while playing the sport. For example, soccer. However, accommodations have been made. We've made adjustments to those rules. We've changed those rules to allow for this need to wear a hijab. And then some clothing companies have even created specific types of headwear that women can wear so that they can be covered up while playing sports. And this would be an example of an accommodation. Okay, the next one is integration. And this is when we are providing equal opportunity for different groups in society. So, when you think about a country like Canada, we are very diverse, very multicultural, and so we need to allow for integration. We have to make sure that all different groups of people, all different types of people, are being treated fairly and equally, right? And so we have something called the Canadian Multiculturalism Act, and that promotes the idea of multiculturalism. It says that every Canadian must receive equal treatment by the government. So it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter which ethnicity you are a part of, which languages you speak, which culture you have. You should be treated equal by by the government here in Canada. You should get equal treatment, and that is called integration. Okay, next we have acculturation. So if you look at these people, these are people who are moving from a different country, and they're moving here to Canada. So they're on their way to the airport, or they're in the airport, but they're going to go through passport control and hop on the plane and fly to Canada. Think about all the changes that are going to happen to them when they get here, right? All of those changes are going to be part of their process of acculturation. Okay, these are changes that occur in a person as a result of contact with another group, right? So when they get here to Canada, they're going to have to learn a new language. They're going to have to learn how to live in a new society. They're going to need to figure out how to use public transit here in Canada. They're going to have to learn how to get a job and get a social insurance number. They're going to have to figure out how to send their kids to school, right? All of that is a process of acculturation, learning and changes that happen when you move into a new place and come into contact with a new group of people. And this happens more and more because of globalization. Next, hybridization. So you see this picture here. This is a picture of not a spoon and not a fork, but a spork, right? It's a hybridization of spoons and forks put together to create something new called a spork. And here we have not a lion and not a tiger, but a combination of both lion and tiger. And when you mix them together, you end up with a liger. It's a hybridization of those two different animals. Well, hybridization happens a lot because of globalization. We have different cultures that mix with each other. And when they mix with each other, sometimes they create new things. And these are called hybridizations. All right, so for example, when you mix sushi, which comes from Japan, with pizza, which comes from Italy, put them together and you get sushi pizza, which is unfortunately a real thing, right? And so that's a hybridization of two different cultures put together, right? Or when you mix, the twangs, the sweet melodies of country music with like a hip hop R&B rhythm, then you end up with great music. Like Old Town Road is a hybridization of country culture with hip hop culture put together, right? Or languages can be the result of hybridization, right? So there are a lot of people who speak Spanish but move to an English speaking country and they start mixing Spanish with English and they call it Spanglish. Or Chinese people who move to Canada and they learn English and they start mixing Chinese with English. They call that Chinglish, right? These are hybridizations. These are new things that occur because of cultures interacting with each other through globalization. Next, we have affirmation of identity. This is the second last one on your paper. And so this happens when a group of people decide that they do not want to be assimilated. All right, so you have these people here, and they are a minority group, and they have a different language and a different culture than most people in their country. And they make a conscious effort. They make a decision that they are not going to lose that culture. They are not going to lose that identity, that language that they have, and they're going to keep it, right? And so an example of this would be the Acadian people in Canada. So here we have a region in the Atlantic provinces of Canada where some Acadian people live. So if you go back to a few hundred years in the past, there were some people from France who moved to a region that is called now Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And they created these settlements and they started living here. And they were different from the rest of um, the colonies here in North America. And so in 1713, France gave up control of these colonies and they made them a French colony living in British territory. And tensions rose between the French and the British, and eventually the British decided to kick these people out, right? And so that's called the deportation, right? So these people who spoke French and they were Catholic, they were kicked out and they were sent off to different places. Many of them were sent to the 13 colonies, which are now the United States. Many of them were also sent back to France. But even though they were sent to all of these different places, they still kept their Acadian identity. They kept their French identity. And eventually they came back, right? When there was peace again and they were allowed to come back, they made their way back into Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And they are still the Acadian people. They've decided to affirm their identities. They decided that they're going to keep their languages, right? So you see they have their own newspapers in their language. They've got their own flag that they've created. They still practice their Catholic religion. They still eat their cultural foods. They have schools that allow them to pass down their language and culture to the next generation. They still do their traditional music. So they decided, okay, we are not going to be assimilated. We're going to keep our identities. They decided to affirm their identities. Okay? And then the last one on the list is cultural revitalization. Okay, so when something is revitalized, it's sort of like it's brought back from the dead in a way, right? So you see this tree is dying, the tree is not doing very great, but it has been revitalized. Life has been brought back into it, and it is now a healthy tree. That is revitalization. And sometimes that happens to cultures. Cultures will revitalize, right? So these are attempts to bring life back to a culture or language that is declining. Declining means it's dying, right? People are losing that language, or people are no longer practicing that culture. It's something that is being lost. Okay, and so an example of this here in Canada would be Indigenous languages, right? So Indigenous languages have been declining for a long time. There have been fewer and fewer people speaking Indigenous languages here in Canada. And so attempts are being made right now to try to revitalize those languages and revitalize Indigenous culture. We'll talk in Unit 2 about the reasons why many Indigenous languages and cultures are declining. But right now, there's an effort that's being made in schools to try to teach young Indigenous kids their languages. right? Their nation's languages. And that is something called cultural revitalization. They're trying to bring life back to these old languages and also to try to teach these kids about their culture, right? That's a way of revitalizing their culture as well. Okay, so you just learned 9 different things, 9 different concepts, and each of them is sort of a result of globalization. And now we're going to do a video study. Okay, so this video study is on a video called God Grew Tired of Us. So if you flip the page in your partial notes, you're going to see the video study, right? And at the bottom of the page, there are 3 different guys. Okay, you can label their names, right? We have John Bull, we have Daniel, we have Panther. These are the 3 main characters of the movie that we're going to watch in class. And this movie really follows their story. These are 3 guys that were born in the country of Sudan, right? And Sudan has, since the movie was made, Sudan has been split into 2 countries, Sudan and South Sudan. At the time when the movie was made, it was still just one country. And this movie teaches us about the war that happened in Sudan. And as a result of the war, people such as these 3 guys, but also many, many others, had to leave Sudan. They had to run away. And we call these guys the lost boys and the lost girls of Sudan. And while watching the movie, what I'm going to get you guys to do is look for examples of each of these concepts in the movie, right? So look for an example of people being marginalized in the movie and write a full sentence in which you explain and describe people being marginalized. And then look for an example of people migrating, moving from one area to another, right? There might be more than one example, but write full sentences explaining who has migrated, from where to where, okay? And then do the same thing for all of these different concepts. And then there's a question. Nope, there isn't a question. Okay, so that's that. So you're going to do that for all of these things, and then that will be it for this lesson. Okay, so I hope that goes well for you, and I hope you have a great day.